The promotion celebration aboard the GSS Meridian was in full swing when Lieutenant Sarah Chen walked into the officers' lounge. The massive space station's artificial gravity hummed beneath her feet as she made her way through clusters of newly promoted officers from various species across the Galactic Federation. Conversations in a dozen languages filled the air, mixing with the soft chime of ceremonial bells that marked such occasions. Sarah had kept to herself most of the evening, nursing a single glass of Terran whiskey while observing the festivities. At 28, she was younger than most officers at her rank, and her human heritage made her stand out among the predominantly alien officer corps. The Federation had only accepted humanity into its ranks 15 years ago, and many species still viewed humans as newcomers who hadn't earned their place among the stars. 3 Zelthrian cadets occupied a corner table, their blue-scaled faces animated with alcohol and arrogance. The reptilian species had been part of the Federation for over 2 centuries and considered themselves superior to most other races, especially humans. Their natural height advantage of nearly 7 feet made them imposing figures in any room. "Look at the little human," sneered Cadet Vextar, his forked tongue flickering as he spoke. "Probably got her promotion through some diversity program. You know how the Federation loves to pretend humans are equals." His companions laughed, their harsh sounds cutting through the celebratory atmosphere. Cadet Zilmoth leaned forward, his yellow eyes gleaming. "I heard she's only a logistics officer anyway. Probably never seen real combat like we have during the Outer Rim campaigns." The third cadet, Kexivore, raised his glass mockingly in Sarah's direction. "To the humans and their participation trophies, may they continue to amuse us with their attempts at military service." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. She had faced this kind of discrimination before and learned that reacting often made situations worse. Instead, she focused on the stars visible through the lounge's massive viewport, reminding herself why she had joined the Federation military in the first place. The harassment escalated as the evening progressed. The Zelthrian cadets grew bolder with each drink, their comments becoming louder and more pointed. Other officers began to notice, some looking uncomfortable, while others seemed entertained by the spectacle. "Hey, human!" Vextar called out, standing from his table with obvious intent to confront her. "My drink is empty. Since you're probably used to serving others, why don't you get me another?" The lounge fell partially silent as nearby conversations stopped. Sarah turned to face the towering reptilian, her expression calm despite the insult. "I suggest you get your own drink, cadet." "Cadet?" Vexitar's voice rose with indignation. "Do you know who my family is? My uncle serves on the Federation War Council. I have more military heritage in my smallest scale than you have in your entire species." Sarah remained seated, her voice steady. "Your family's service is commendable, but it doesn't excuse poor behavior." The insult clearly struck a nerve. Vexitar's companions stood as well, forming a loose circle around Sarah's table. The Zelthrian's hand moved to his ceremonial blade, a traditional weapon that cadets were permitted to carry during formal occasions. "Perhaps someone needs to teach this human her place," Zilmoth hissed, his own hand moving to his weapon. "The Federation has become too soft, allowing inferior species to wear our uniforms." The tension in the room became palpable. Several officers moved away from the confrontation, while others pulled out their communication devices, likely to alert security. A few seemed ready to intervene, but the presence of the ceremonial weapons gave them pause. Sarah finally stood, her movement fluid and controlled. Despite being significantly shorter than the Zelthrians, her presence seemed to fill the space around her. "Gentlemen, I suggest you reconsider your current course of action." "Or what?" Vexitar's voice dripped with contempt as he partially drew his blade. "You'll file a complaint? Run crying to your human superiors?" The standoff stretched for several tense moments. Sarah's hand rested casually at her side, showing no sign of reaching for a weapon or backing down. Her eyes met each of the Zelthrians in turn, and something in her gaze made them shift uncomfortably. "You have no idea who you're threatening," came a voice from across the lounge. Captain Martinez, the station's commanding officer, strode through the crowd with purpose. The Hispanic officer's presence commanded immediate attention, and conversations throughout the lounge came to a complete halt. His dress uniform was immaculate, displaying numerous commendations and service ribbons that spoke of extensive combat experience. "Captain," Vextar straightened, though he didn't fully sheath his blade. "We were just having a friendly conversation with this logistics officer." Martinez's expression darkened as he surveyed the scene. "Friendly conversation? With drawn weapons?" "The human was being disrespectful," Kexvor interjected, emboldened by alcohol and perceived backing from his companions. "She needs to learn proper military courtesy." "Military courtesy," Martinez repeated, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "You three are about to learn a lesson in military courtesy yourselves." The captain moved to stand beside Sarah, his presence clearly protective. "Do you know who you're threatening to strike?" "Some junior logistics officer," Zilmoth replied dismissively. "Probably got her rank through political connections rather than merit." Martinez looked at the three cadets with a mixture of disbelief and growing anger. Junior logistics officer, political connections? He gestured toward Sarah, who remained silent throughout the exchange. "Gentlemen, allow me to introduce someone whose service record would make seasoned veterans weep with envy." The captain's voice carried across the now silent lounge, ensuring every officer present could hear his words clearly. "This woman has seen more combat than the three of you combined. She's led missions behind enemy lines, saved countless lives, and earned decorations for valor that most officers only dream of receiving." Vextar's confidence began to waver as he noticed other senior officers gathering around the scene. The casual dismissal on their faces was being replaced by expressions of shock and growing concern. "Furthermore," Martinez continued, his voice rising with each word, "her tactical innovations during the Krextar conflict saved entire star systems from destruction. Her logistics expertise kept our forces supplied during the longest siege in Federation history." Sarah's expression remained neutral, but those who knew her well could see the slight tightness around her eyes that indicated her discomfort with the public attention. She had always preferred to let her work speak for itself rather than seeking recognition. "But most importantly," Martinez's voice dropped to a more serious tone, "you three have just threatened to assault a superior officer whose rank and authority far exceed your understanding." The Zelthrian cadets exchanged uncertain glances, their earlier bravado beginning to crumble as the implications of the captain's words sank in. Around the lounge, other officers began to whisper among themselves, clearly aware of something the cadets had missed. "I don't understand," Vextar said, his voice losing its earlier arrogance. "She's wearing lieutenant's insignia." Martinez smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Is she? Look again." The three cadets turned to examine Sarah's uniform more closely, their confidence evaporating as they began to notice details they had overlooked in their rush to judgment. The cut of her dress uniform was subtly different from standard issue, made from materials that spoke of higher rank and authority. The ribbons on her chest, when examined carefully, included decorations reserved for the highest levels of military service. But most telling were the small, discreet pins on her collar that they had mistaken for standard lieutenant's insignia in the dim lounge lighting. As their eyes adjusted and they looked more carefully, the truth became undeniably clear. "Those aren't lieutenant's bars," Zilmoth whispered, his face paling beneath his blue scales. The pins were indeed different, crafted from a rare metal that caught and reflected light in a way that standard insignia could not. They bore the intricate design reserved for only the highest-ranking officers in the Federation military, a rank so elevated that most cadets would never encounter it in person during their entire careers. Sarah Chen, the woman they had been harassing and threatening all evening, wore the insignia of a 4-star general. The silence that followed Captain Martinez's revelation was absolute. The 3 Zelthrian cadets stood frozen, their ceremonial blades still partially drawn, as the full weight of their situation crashed down upon them. Around the lounge, officers from various species stared in a mixture of awe and horror at what they had just witnessed. 4-star General Sarah Chen stood quietly, her expression unchanged despite having been revealed as one of the most powerful military officers in the known galaxy. The rank was so rare that fewer than a dozen individuals across all member species held it at any given time. These were the officers who planned galactic defense strategies, commanded entire armadas, and advised the Federation Council on matters of war and peace. Vexitar's blade clattered to the floor as his nerveless fingers lost their grip. The sound echoed through the silent lounge like a death knell. "General," he whispered, his voice cracking with disbelief and growing terror. 4 stars, Captain Martinez confirmed, his own voice carrying a note of reverence that was impossible to miss. General Chen has been operating under light cover for the past 6 months, conducting a comprehensive review of Federation military installations and personnel. The implications hit the cadets like a physical blow. This hadn't been a chance encounter with some junior officer they could bully with impunity. They had been systematically harassing one of the highest-ranking military officers in the galaxy, someone whose word could end their careers with a single recommendation. "But she looks so young," Kexavor stammered, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. How could someone so young achieve such rank? General Chen finally spoke, her voice carrying the quiet authority that came from commanding respect rather than demanding it. "Merit isn't determined by age, cadet. It's earned through service, sacrifice, and the ability to make decisions that save lives and protect the innocent." Her words carried weight that went beyond their simple meaning. Every officer in the room understood that they were hearing from someone who had made those life-and-death decisions countless times, someone who bore the responsibility for the safety of billions of Federation citizens. "The logistics background you mocked so dismissively," she continued, involved coordinating supply lines for 17 different species across 47 star systems during the Krextar conflict. When the main supply routes were cut by enemy forces, my team developed alternative distribution networks that kept Federation forces operational for 8 months behind enemy lines. Captain Martinez nodded grimly. "The Battle of Kepler Station. Every military academy in the Federation studies that campaign as an example of tactical brilliance under impossible circumstances. The enemy had superior numbers and better positioning," General Chen explained, her tone educational rather than boastful. "They controlled all major shipping routes and had effectively besieged our forces. Traditional military wisdom said we should retreat and regroup." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "Instead, we turned their advantages against them. By using their own supply interdiction tactics, we created a network of hidden supply caches and alternative routes that not only sustained our forces but allowed us to launch surprise attacks on their rear positions." Zilmoth found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "You're the Phantom General, the one who broke the siege of Kepler Station." The nickname clearly made General Chen uncomfortable, but she didn't deny it. "Media sensationalism. The victory belonged to every soldier, pilot, and support staff member who risked their lives to implement a desperate plan." "Desperate but successful," Martinez added. The Krextar forces were so focused on maintaining their siege that they never suspected supply lines could be established through seemingly impossible routes. By the time they realized what was happening, Federation forces had not only broken free, but were behind their lines, cutting their own supply networks. The tactical brilliance of the operation was legendary among military officers, but few had known the identity of the mastermind behind it. The fact that it had been planned and executed by someone who appeared to be a young human woman made the achievement even more remarkable. After Kepler Station, General Chen was promoted to oversee all Federation logistics operations, Martinez continued. She revolutionized how we coordinate supplies across multiple species with different environmental and dietary requirements. Her innovations reduced waste by 40% while improving delivery efficiency by 60%. But that wasn't enough, General Chen said quietly. Logistics without understanding frontline conditions is just theory. So I requested combat assignments. The room hung on her every word as she continued. I served as a line officer in 3 major campaigns, learning how supply decisions affected troops in actual battle conditions. I've carried wounded soldiers under enemy fire, held positions against overwhelming odds, and made the kind of choices that keep you awake at night. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much death, who had been forced to make impossible decisions about who lived and who died based on available resources and tactical necessities. The Outer Rim campaigns you mentioned, she said, looking directly at the 3 cadets. I was there. I commanded the relief force that rescued the survivors of Outpost Gamma 7 after it was overrun by hostile forces. Vextar's face went completely white beneath his blue scales. Every cadet in the Federation knew the story of Outpost Gamma 7, where a small garrison had held out for 3 weeks against impossible odds, waiting for rescue that many thought would never come. The rescue mission was considered impossible, Martinez explained for the benefit of those who might not know the full story. The outpost was surrounded by enemy forces in superior numbers, with no clear approach routes and limited intelligence about defensive positions. Standard doctrine called for orbital bombardment, followed by a ground assault with overwhelming force, General Chen continued. But that would have killed the defenders along with the attackers. Instead, we used precision strikes to create confusion, while small teams infiltrated through terrain the enemy considered impassable. The operation had been studied in military academies as an example of how innovative tactics could overcome seemingly impossible odds. The fact that it had been planned and executed by the woman standing before them was almost too much to comprehend. 67 Federation soldiers were rescued from that outpost, she said quietly. 67 people who went home to their families because we refused to accept that their situation was hopeless. The silence stretched for several moments, as everyone in the room absorbed the magnitude of what they had learned. These weren't just military statistics or academic exercises, they were real operations with real consequences, planned and executed by someone who looked like she could be their younger sister. Your family's military tradition, General Chen said, addressing Vextar directly, includes your great-uncle, Admiral Zextavor, who served with distinction in the frontier wars. He was an excellent officer who understood that true strength comes from unity between different species, not from believing in superiority over others. The fact that she knew his family history in such detail demonstrated the depth of her knowledge about Federation military personnel. It also suggested that her presence at this celebration was far from coincidental. Which brings us to the current situation, Captain Martinez said, his voice taking on an official tone that made everyone in the room stand a little straighter. 3 cadets have just threatened a 4-star general with drawn weapons in front of multiple witnesses. The legal implications were staggering. Threatening a superior officer was a court-martial offense under normal circumstances. Threatening a 4-star general with weapons could be considered an act of mutiny, potentially carrying consequences up to and including execution under military law. Furthermore, Martinez continued, they did so while making statements that could be construed as species-based discrimination, which violates both Federation charter principles and military codes of conduct. General Chen raised a hand to stop him. Captain, I think we need to address something more important than legal consequences. She turned to face the three cadets directly, her expression serious but not unkind. Do you understand why your behavior tonight was wrong? The three Zelthrian cadets stood speechless, their earlier arrogance completely shattered by the revelation of General Chen's true identity. Vextar's mouth opened and closed without sound, while his companions seemed frozen in place, unable to process the magnitude of their error. I asked you a question, General Chen said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that made hardened veterans snap to attention. Do you understand why your behavior tonight was wrong? Because you outrank us, Zilmoth finally managed to stammer. No, General Chen replied firmly. That's not the reason. The correction surprised everyone in the lounge. They had expected her to emphasize the breach of military protocol, the disrespect shown to a superior officer, or the serious legal consequences of their actions. Your behavior was wrong because you judge my worth based on my species, my apparent age, and your assumptions about my background, she continued. Rank has nothing to do with it. If I were truly a junior logistics officer, would that have made your actions acceptable? The question hung in the air, forcing not just the cadets, but every observer to examine their own assumptions and biases. Several officers shifted uncomfortably as they realized they had been complicit in the harassment through their silence. The Federation was founded on the principle that all species, working together, are stronger than any single race standing alone, General Chen explained. When you dismiss someone based on their species or background, you weaken that foundation. She gestured toward the viewport, where stars from dozens of different systems were visible in the distance. Each of those lights represents a world with its own unique strengths, perspectives, and contributions to our collective defense. Humans brought innovation and adaptability. Zelthrians contributed military tradition and strategic thinking. The cephalopods offered their mathematical precision, while the void dancers shared their understanding of space-time navigation. Captain Martinez nodded in agreement. The Krextar conflict was won precisely because we combined different species' strengths rather than trying to prove any one race was superior to others. My tactical innovations at Kepler Station, General Chen continued, were based on human thinking patterns that prioritized flexibility and unconventional approaches. But they never would have worked without Zelthrian discipline in execution, cephalopod calculations for supply distribution, and void dancer navigation through hostile space. The educational tone of her words made it clear that this was a teaching moment rather than a lecture. She genuinely wanted these young officers to understand the deeper principles behind their actions rather than simply being punished for breaking rules. Cadet Vextar, she said, addressing him directly. Your uncle, Admiral Zextavor, once told me that the strongest military units were those where soldiers trusted each other regardless of species. He said that in combat, the only thing that mattered was whether your teammate would risk their life to save yours. The personal reference to his family member clearly affected the young Zelthrian. His great-uncle was a legendary figure in their military tradition, someone whose opinions carried enormous weight in their society. He also said, General Chen continued, that the greatest threat to Federation unity wasn't external enemies but internal divisions based on prejudice and arrogance. He spent his entire career working to build bridges between different species in the military. I didn't know, Vextar whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. He never told us about working with humans. Because to him, it wasn't about working with humans specifically, General Chen explained. It was about working with fellow Federation officers who happened to be human. The species was irrelevant compared to their competence and dedication. The distinction was subtle but important. It emphasized merit-based evaluation over species-based assumptions, exactly the principle the cadets had violated through their behavior. Now, General Chen said, her tone becoming more businesslike, we need to address the immediate situation. 3 Federation cadets have drawn weapons on a superior officer in front of multiple witnesses. By regulation, this requires a formal investigation and probable court-martial proceedings. The legal reality hit the cadets like a physical blow. Court-martial could result in dismissal from service, criminal charges, and permanent disgrace that would follow them for the rest of their lives. However, she continued, I have the authority to handle this matter through alternative disciplinary measures if I believe the offending officers can learn from their mistakes and become better representatives of Federation values. Hope flickered in the cadets' eyes as they realized they might have a chance to avoid the worst consequences of their actions. Captain Martinez, General Chen said formally, please arrange for these 3 cadets to be assigned to extended cultural sensitivity training, followed by rotation through different species military units for the next 6 months. They need to learn firsthand about the contributions and perspectives of the races they've been dismissing. Yes, General, Martinez replied crisply. I'll coordinate with personnel to arrange appropriate assignments. Additionally, General Chen continued, they will each write a formal research paper on the military contributions of a species other than their own, to be reviewed by a panel of senior officers from multiple races. The papers will be distributed throughout the Academy as educational materials. The assignments were clearly designed to be educational rather than purely punitive. They would force the cadets to confront their prejudices through direct experience and academic study. Finally, she said, her voice taking on a more personal tone, I want each of you to think about why you joined the Federation military. Was it to prove Zelthrian superiority? Or was it to protect the ideals that keep billions of beings safe across the galaxy? The question struck at the heart of their motivations and forced them to examine whether their actions aligned with their stated goals of military service. Vextar suddenly straightened and began to remove something from his uniform, his ceremonial family crest, a symbol of his clan's military heritage that he wore with enormous pride. General, he said, his voice shaking with emotion, I dishonored this crest tonight through my actions. I don't deserve to wear it until I prove myself worthy of my family's military tradition. The gesture was significant in Zelthrian culture, representing a voluntary acknowledgement of shame and commitment to redemption. It showed that he understood the gravity of his actions beyond mere rule-breaking. His companions followed suit, each removing their own family crests and offering them to General Chen as a symbol of their recognition that they had failed to live up to their heritage. Keep them, General Chen said firmly, but remember what they represent. Your family served the Federation with honor, building the foundation that allows all of us to work together today. Prove yourselves worthy of that legacy. The gesture of allowing them to retain their crests while acknowledging their failures struck the perfect balance between accountability and hope for redemption. Now, General Chen said, addressing the entire lounge, let's continue celebrating the promotions of officers who have earned their advancement through merit and dedication to Federation values. The crowd began to disperse, conversations resuming in quiet tones as officers processed what they had witnessed. Many approached the 3 cadets to offer encouragement and support for their upcoming training, while others sought opportunities to speak with General Chen about military matters. As the evening continued, the incident became a learning experience for everyone present. Junior officers gained a deeper understanding of how prejudice could undermine military effectiveness, while senior officers were reminded of their responsibility to address discrimination when they witnessed it. General Chen returned to her quiet corner, once again nursing her glass of Terran whiskey while observing the festivities. But now the conversations around her had changed, focusing on cooperation between species and the shared values that made the Federation strong. Captain Martinez approached her table as the evening wound down. General, if I may ask, why were you here tonight? This seems like an unusual venue for someone of your rank. She smiled slightly, the first genuine expression of warmth she had shown all evening. "Because, Captain, the real measure of our military isn't found in staff meetings and strategic planning sessions. It's found in moments like this, when young officers reveal their true character under pressure." "You were testing them?" "I was observing," she corrected. "The test was entirely of their own making. I simply provided an opportunity for their real attitudes to surface." Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "And now you have the information you need for your personnel review." "More than that," General Chen replied. "I have 3 young officers who now understand that their actions have consequences, and an entire lounge full of witnesses who saw that the Federation takes discrimination seriously while still offering opportunities for redemption." The evening's events would be discussed throughout the Federation military for years to come, serving as a reminder that rank, species, and appearance meant nothing compared to character and competence. The 3 Zelthrian cadets would complete their additional training and eventually become exemplary officers, their experience serving as a powerful lesson about the dangers of prejudice. And General Sarah Chen would continue her work, ensuring that the Federation military remained true to its founding principles of unity, merit, and mutual respect among all species brave enough to defend the galaxy together.